This is the most advanced Hall sensor controller, but it came packaged with confusion. I have reviewed the Machenike controller before, and I don't have high expectations for them. I still don't know how to pronounce their brand name. This controller is perhaps the third controller with a Hall sensor joystick, totaling 4 in the market right now, as there is also the Sonicon PS4 controller on Amazon. It came with a feature that you usually get in a Pro controller, but of course, there are some drawbacks. The Machenike G6 is their latest product for their controller lineup. Last time they made a controller with a design that was so bad that it made me very negative about them in the whole video. However, this controller changed my perspective a bit and also confused me a lot. Their board is not much different from the previous controller. Opening the box, you are welcomed with a quick guide card, a 2.4 GHz dongle, and the controller itself. Under the plastic mold, there is a USB-C cable and their manual inside a plastic cover. The booklet is in Chinese and English. The controller body has an Xbox style design all over it. This time, they didn't go with their own design, which is a safer choice. The surface texture is similar to previous generation Xbox One S, and it also has sublimation printing on the body, which makes it look less professional but more fancy. In addition, they added bling bling when it's connected, which boosts your FPS by 120 frames per second. It's not RGB, so that will drop your FPS by 60. On the front, there are 4 extra buttons, which are turbo, functions, LED, and vibration buttons. All the buttons use micro switch except for the bumper button, which is a rubber dome. The grip is similar to latest Xbox Series controller, and it also comes with a slot for a phone holder, but they don't give you a phone holder in the package. Overall, it has an Xbox Series body shape with a gamer aesthetic. The trigger type on this controller is Hall sensor trigger, which is an upgrade to their previous controller. The trigger shape is exactly the same as Xbox Series controller. It also has a dotted texture like the Xbox Series controller. Despite the trigger being lighter to press than Xbox controller, it didn't hinder my play. There are 3 adjustments for the trigger stop, with the full trigger being the exact same as Xbox Series controller. The medium setting will have a 50% travel distance of analog input, while the shortest one is 25% travel distance and doesn't have analog input. The bumper is also light to press while having a similar Xbox Series style. If you like the Xbox Series controller trigger style, I don't think you will have an issue using this one, except it's on the lighter side. The ABXY buttons on this controller use Kaihua micro switch, or to be exact, mouse switch. This time the button is much better to operate. Unlike on their previous controller, the button has a more rounded shape and when pressed is not flush to the body. Travel distance is about 0.5 mm to 3/4 of a millimeter. This is the most comfortable micro switch ABXY button I've tested, but it is still stiffer than regular rubber dome or a modded GuliKit hybrid switch. For palm grip, I don't think you will have any issue using these buttons. Other gripping styles might need some adjustment, especially if you come from rubber dome. On Nintendo Switch, the position of ABXY follow Xbox layout. If you use Switch as your main platform, this controller layout can confuse you, but you can always change it to Switch layout in the app. The joystick on this controller is a Hall sensor joystick from GuliKit. It has a removable thumbstick, but they don't give you an extra one. Maybe they want to sell the extra cap separately. Since it uses a GuliKit joystick, you can swap it with an Xbox or PlayStation thumbstick cap. The cap has a soft rubber, but it has a slick texture, so it feels slippery. I will definitely swap this with an Xbox thumbstick once the thumbstick has worn out. It also has a smooth rotations thanks to the POM ring, even smoother than my GuliKit despite both using metal and plastic rings. The joystick has a slight wobble too, which when you have a zero dead zone can actually affect you. At first, my wobble was slightly at the top. After an hour of calibration, I managed to make it go to the center. The wobble is similar to my 8-bit Ultimate with a minimum of 5% dead zone, which is very small. Anything lower and the wobble will appear and can contribute to minor drift. When it comes to circularity, this might surprise you. Out of the box, this controller has a perfect circularity on the right joystick and a box shape on the left, not just any box, but a perfect box. I asked them and they said it was by design. When I did a circular test, I realized it snapped to the diagonal axis, which I thought was my eyes playing tricks on me. But when I taped my monitor and tested again, the snapping was real. It's much more sensitive on the axis and less sensitive at the diagonal. For a regular controller, usually you have a box field as a boundary and a physical circle limiting your movement. Usually you get slightly extra input at the corner because the port was placed perpendicular to each other. Those extra movement are mapped to the circle, which applies to the right joystick. The issue is every game sees the joystick as a circular input. So out of the box, you use a controller with 30% less active area. About the snapping feature, my guess is that they map the circle directly to the box, which made the center have less movement for bigger rotation in game, while at the corner you get less despite moving more. To be honest, you actually can get a similar effect with a PlayStation controller with 50% reduced active area. Using this joystick, I don't feel any different than other Hall sensor joystick, although you can see my icon actually moving in a rectangle. In general, I don't even realize it. Since they said it was built for FPS, I tried the controller in Apex Legends. I can see the idea, especially faster actuation is strafing side by side while moving forward or backward. However, I can say that I dropped from the cliff way too many times when I just wanted to pick at the bottom. The axis is just too sensitive. Aiming is okay, and I'm just using the right joystick. But when playing with a controller, we usually use a combination of left and right joystick. The results? I barely hit anyone in every single match. If you meet a player that moves like this, GG. Almost every controller I've used has a circular input or near circular input, so I've already built a muscle memory around those. When I changed to a GuliKit that used perfect circularity, it took me about a day to get comfortable and 2-3 weeks to be really good with it. I can do the same with this controller, but I believe it will take way longer to get really good using it. But why should I let the company trash out my muscle memory? You also cannot change it to circular mapping in their customization app. In Apex, we can reduce the auto threshold to make it more sensitive, but it will affect both joysticks. Hence, regardless of whether you already use reduced active area in game or not, this boxy joystick will affect you and throw away your muscle memory. Fortunately, you can change it to a circular input by a firmware update, which is a separate firmware from the one provided in their KeyLinker app. I got a file after asking them, so basically if you don't ask them, you're stuck with a box joystick. Once updated, it feels a lot better to use, except I'm still trash at Apex. Overall, I'm quite happy with the joystick after updating the firmware. Before that, it was a nightmare. You might want to use Google Translate on their quick guide card because some info like the joystick calibration step was not told in their manual. Calibration is done by pressing turbo, start and home button. Rotate both joystick twice and tap your trigger twice in full trigger stop. Finally, press back buttons. Their joystick position is incorrect in the apps regardless how many times you try to calibrate. To see the actual input, you can try using gamepad tester, which the dead zone turned to 0, and that is how I do my calibration. The switch on this D-pad is lighter than Xbox Series controller and much closer to the older Xbox version. One thing I noticed, I keep pressing the top direction when pressing left and right. It also has a lower pivot point than Xbox controller, so I would consider this D-pad to be on the sensitive side. Those who play fighting games might find it difficult to use the D-pad for movement. I much prefer a clicker D-pad like Xbox Series, but that is just a personal preference. At the bottom, there are two big back buttons that are comfortable to press and have a clicky feeling. Perhaps the clickiest I've tested. The mapping software is the KeyLinker software, which was developed by a separate company. I don't really like and enjoy using KeyLinker because you need to use a phone or tablet to customize the controller. Customizing this controller for a phone is not that comfortable because of the small screen, so I just use an iPad. Almost every general buttons can be remapped to other buttons. Turbo functions can be accessed in the app or on the fly. On the fly turbo has semi-auto and full auto, which will cycle on both even when you want to switch it off. You can record a maximum of 21 inputs for the back buttons, and it also has on the fly macro record. There are also double action macro which can be triggered on the trigger, similar to what some manufacturers did on their keyboard. You can only use this function on full trigger stop and triggering macro at 80% travel distance. Now, my aircraft can jigging automatically after casting elemental skill. Once recorded, you can fine tune it in the app. To clear the macro, just press function, then double click the macro button. The battery is 860 mAh battery, which they claim can give you 8 to 10 hours of playtime, but my testing only give me 7 to 8 hours with medium vibration in apex. The vibration is not the best despite being able to get very strong. It doesn't have that details I usually get with 8-bit do. It doesn't have that boom boom boom, but more bang bang bang. If you want to use gyro, you can use switch mode to have the gyro by using steam input, but you cannot have analog trigger since the Switch Pro doesn't have analog trigger. I've tested this in Switch and their gyro is kind of good. Gyro calibration can be done by pressing back, B and home button. In the booklet it said A button, but that is wrong. You can, on the fly, simulate the right stick with gyro. Press function then R3 to cycle between manual and auto. In manual mode, you can only switch on the gyro with unassigned back button. 2.4 GHz has X input and D input, which can be selected by pressing A, B and home button, while X input mode only has X input. I find it odd that if you want to use 2.4 GHz connection for the PC, you need to use switch mode. If you already pair the controller with switch, you need to pair again if you want to use 2.4 GHz on the PC. iOS and Android mode are also separated on Bluetooth connection, and there is no gyro except right joystick simulation using gyro. To switch between modes, you need to turn off the controller first. Turn to any mode you want and then switch it back on. Directly switching the mode is not supported. When I asked about latency, they said it has 5 ms on 2.4 GHz and 7 ms on Bluetooth. In the store page, they claim the polling rate is 200 Hz aka 5 ms latency. They are right and hugely wrong. Big time. The 5 ms that they claim is actually minimum latency, while actual average latency is about 9 to 10 ms. Instantaneous latency is still important, but the one that players usually feel is the average latency. Plus, their Bluetooth input usually score a slightly higher polling rate than 2.4 GHz. This makes me think, what the hell are they thinking about polling rate and latency? For the boring wired connection, this is the result. Overclocking also has no actual impact on the controller performance. Disassembling this controller is slightly more difficult than usual because the screw hole is deep. You will need to use a long bit screwdriver to remove it. My suggestion is to unscrew it and screw it back with less force, since if you want to open this controller in the future, it will be a lot easier to handle. Once the screw becomes too tight to remove, which usually occurs in old controllers, you are most likely going to strip the screw. If that happens, it is almost impossible to remove the screw unless you are willing to damage the controller shell. This controller also lacks profile system. Sometimes after setting the controller in the apps, it will not automatically reconnect to the last device. Instead, I need to switch it off and on again. Bluetooth connectivity is not compatible with open source PS3 driver from GitHub. You can pair the controller with the PC, but when you want to reconnect it to the PC, it will disconnect itself after establishing a connection. Despite removing the driver, sometimes I have difficulty to connect when other controllers are already connected to the PC. 2.4 GHz is slow to connect. Most of the time, I need to move closer to the dongle to connect. Regarding durability, they do provide a 1-year warranty. But if you are in the US, this is just equivalent to no warranty at all, since you might need to send it back to China for a warranty claim. Since it is on the lighter side, such as the trigger and micro switch, with heavy use, there is a good chance for this to break. However, I have never used any Machenike product for a long-term usage yet, so I cannot further comment on that. For the price, this gets a bit weird. In the Asia market, this controller is about $60 while 8-bit Duo Ultimate is about $50 and King Kong Pro is at $40. In the US market, 8-bit Duo and GuliKit are still at $70, though sometimes I saw GuliKit drop to $60. Since you can only buy Machenike on AliExpress for now, it will be $65, which is cheaper than 8-bit Duo and GuliKit. I suggest getting it from the official store if you want to buy from AliExpress, because at least you can get official support from their store. There are only black and white variation, so pick whichever you want. For a conclusion, the Machenike controller is perhaps the most advanced controller with Hall sensor joystick. If not for the out-of-the-box experience for the joystick and slow pulling rate, I might rate this higher than 8-bit Duo Ultimate. I think the company is still searching for the right formula for their controller lineup. In comparison to their previous controller, this is a huge step up. For the Asia market, I think 8-bit Duo Ultimate wins hands down, but for the US and Europe market, this might be a compelling option. The only other reason you will want this controller is for their Xbox Series body design, which puts Machenike G6 as a mixture of features sandwiched between GuliKit King Kong Pro and 8-bit Duo Ultimate. If you don't think this controller is worth it, I suggest you to just wait. It's just a matter of time before Hall sensor controllers start flooding the market. The Pro, Hall sensor joystick and trigger, lot of customization, improved ABXY button, customizable trigger length, big back buttons, Xbox body design, and on-the-fly macro recording. Cons: weird out-of-the-box left joystick, PC 2.4 GHz wireless need to use switch mode, incompatibility with PS3 driver, polling rate slower than Xbox, no profile system, and lot of confusion. That's about it for my review. If you found it helpful, please consider subscribing, and I'm feeling a bit deprived with waifu supplement. Okay, bye. Okay. Okay. 先喝。